Right. Hi, everyone. My name is Rohit Parak. I'm a food and agriculture policy analyst, and I'll be talking about the issues regarding the three farmer laws and the minimum support price. So, the reasons behind the farmer protest, the main couple of reasons on that. Um, Right. So if we actually look at the main demands of the farmer protests in India, that actually has to do with the three farm laws and minimum support price being extended to farmers. Before we get into the laws and the demands broadly, just a bit of background and context. In India, we have roughly around 86% of our farmers are small marginal farmers. The average landholding is 1 hectare, very different compared to what we have in a lot of other Western countries and even some developing countries as well, where the average farm holding size goes up to 100 hectares or even much more as well. The situation, the background where these protests takes place is that within the last 3 decades. I'm specifically referring to, I guess, 1991 census, 2011 census. We've actually had the number of full-time farmers in India reducing from 118 million to 95 million. So, roughly 25% of full-time farmers have actually reduced in India. And the trend is the census takes place once every 10 years. The trend is expected to continue even now, even when the rural population is increasing. That's the trend we have. Whereas the labor population is increasing from, it's literally doubled between 1991 and 2011. And 1991 was the year where, the liberalization, privatization, globalization reforms took place. So-called the 1991 reforms, where India was open to the markets. Before that, it wasn't much so. And If you look at the average farmer income as well, it is pretty low. I mean, in Indian currency, we have, the economic survey, the government economic survey reports stating that in half the country, the average monthly income is less than 1,700 rupees a month. I don't know what it would be in per parity, but it would come to, I mean, if we actually translate it, it would be 17 pounds a month, less than that, the average farmer income. Now, obviously, it shouldn't be taken as 17 pounds in UK to India, but yeah, that'll be the literal transition, which is very, very low, even by Indian terms. And again, I mean, once one looks into policy documents, one does see that the whole idea of actually getting farmers to leave agriculture and become agriculture labor has been a policy by design across political parties, across spectrum, and so on. The idea that being, that farmers actually quit agriculture, follow work as labor, take non-farm related roles, whereas clearly, I mean, those sort of jobs, in terms of the numbers that are there in India, clearly don't exist again compared to the Western countries, where those sort of jobs and so on have might still be there. But again, the idea still takes place from the get big or get out sort of a policy framework, coming in from a very Western oriented framework, which is clearly not suited in for India. Not many people would actually say, not many politicians would actually say that they want farmers to actually go out. But yeah, there is a section, a spectrum of economists, thinkers within the government, within the administration, across different political parties who have been working on this idea. Right. So then going on to the three farmer laws, which were actually on which the protest is taking place. Ashlesha would be giving a bit more context in terms of how they were brought in and so on. I'll just go straight to the farm laws and the specifics on that. They are very wordy, but we'll actually refer to maybe the broad context of them in terms of how they are being referred and how they're being understood. The first one is the APMC Bypass Act, the Dual Regulation of Agricultural Marketing Act. So this, as a drama, this actually refers to the Agricultural Produce Marketing Committee being bypassed. Uh, the second one is on contract farming, which is basically a pre-agreed contract with farmers. I'll get into what contract farming actually means as well. And the third one refers to freedom of hoarding for agribusinesses, which relates more onto the storage related aspect. But yeah, these are the three laws in terms of on which forms a primary aspect in terms of why the protests are taking place. So going on to the act itself, we actually have there are some major issues in terms of the APMC Bypass Act. What the act primarily does is it actually allows for unregulated private trade areas. Now, there is a lot of myth going around which actually says that it allows for this frees farmers from the monopoly of APMCs, which are basically the state government regulated marketing produce areas. However, even before the laws, I mean, most of the trade actually took place outside these government trade areas. However, they were still regulated. They were still regulated by the state government bodies, even when in cases where private trade was allowed, which was in the case for most of most of India. They used to be allowed. What this act actually does is pretty much completely deregulates these trade areas. It actually also incentivizes traders as well to move to these new trade areas by ensuring no free charge to traders compared to the fee that they have to pay in the regulated markets for maintenance and upkeep of the market and so on. There is a grievance redressal mechanism gap as well, which actually does not allow a farmer to take the matter to court. It does allow for to be resolved at local level. However, the local resolution mechanism is being done by the government mechanism, which again was found to be quite faulty in terms of lack of satisfactory redressal. And then what we have been seeing is that anyone can literally just go and buy directly from farmers without any registration or so on. And also tied into what really price is actually to be provided to farmers. And what we have been seeing is that these APMCs, because of the incentives that have been provided to the new private trade areas, the APMCs are being weakened. We are seeing trade go out of the APMCs to the new unregulated trade areas pretty quickly since the law came in as an ordinance and the law in the last few months. The government, in the discussion that are taking place, the government has spoken about addressing the last 4 points. But the key one in terms of the unregulated private trade areas, that hasn't been addressed at all. So that's that on the APMC Bypass Act, which is one of the main ones, which is leading to such a huge protest. And again, what one sees in this is the APMCs are really places where there have been some flaws with that. But it doesn't actually address those flaws and goes into an entirely different direction of liberalizing the marketing of the produce. Right. The second one is on the Contract Farming Act. Now, if you look at contract farming, the basics of contract farming is that it actually allows for contract between the farmers and another entity which is on the basis of pre-agreed price, quality of produce, acreage, place of delivery, and the time of delivery and supply. It has been found to be generally more suited to larger farmers, not really oriented towards smaller farmers mostly in India and many places around the world. In India, the contract farming starts in from the time of Green Revolution broadly, where again the seed production was actually as a responsibility given and oriented to companies. Also in the case of GM cotton as well, and there have been a whole lot of other, in late 1980s, early 1990s, PepsiCo, where in terms of its potato production and so on, was where contract farming has its origin. So again, this has been regulated in the state government acts in the past as well. So it is not that it was unregulated, but again, this actually again centralizes a lot of this in terms for the central government. Again, some of the major issues in this is that it again exempts the contract farming from state government regulation, and also from the stock limit as well, where basically the uh, agro processing companies and so on, which I'll talk a bit more about in next slide, they are again being exempted from any level in terms of maintaining the stock limits and so on. There are a whole lot of issues with contract farming, not only in India but around the world. Uh, Good farming practices, I mean, they are generally known to be oriented towards the companies. The contracts are really not designed in a manner which are oriented towards farmers, which is why FAO in itself has also been speaking about actually having ethical contract farming practices. And even in this law, there are some good farming practices being mentioned about, but they've been in legal language, they've been shrouded in the may rather than actually shall. So they've been sort of kept as optional. And again, there have been a whole host of contract farming issues in from the last few decades of experience in India, where there have been quality cotton produced by contracting firms. On cases, no procurement of produce as well. There have been delayed payments, low price actually given to farmers, poor quality inputs, higher cost of production, and so on. Similarly, again on this as well, the grievance redressal mechanism actually prohibits the matter being taken to court by farmers as well, which is a major flaw in this. Again, one of the proposals in terms of the discussion taking place between the government and the farmer groups does speak about allowing for this to be taken to court as well. But again, I mean, does not address any of the other points, the major issues with Contract Farming Act in itself. There is a larger issue around, again, I mean, you might have seen, again, a whole lot of things being taken in from state government into central government. There is a whole lot of discussion going on that as well, whether that is actually legal, whether the central government actually exceeded its authority. That discussion is taking place as well. But yeah, that's I mean, the matter is in court in terms of looking at that. The third act, very quickly to speak about, which basically is about freedom of hoarding for agribusinesses. What this actually allows is that the supply of a whole lot of produce, and it's will only be regulated only under very few circumstances: extraordinary price rise, natural calamity, is war, famine, and also how it defines some of these situations as well. That 100% increase in the retail price of horticulture produce, 50% in case of non-perishable agricultural food. And also these price rises have been not being kept in a local context. So again, I mean, price rise could obviously be at times be national, but then there are local circumstances which have been seen in the past as well, and it allows for a pretty pretty liberal mechanism in terms of incentive, opening it up for agribusinesses for hoarding. And also the background context of this is this actually does see in the last few years there have been very unexpected and unreasonable price rises. Some of them have been investigated and found to be actually linked to scams, which is basically being on price hoarding and manipulation of price to actually for the traders, international and domestic traders, to benefit from this hoarding as well. And generally, once every year, once every 2 years, there is a major, price rise in the basic commodities, which is seen in pulses and onions. So some of it have been actually being found to be linked to manipulation, and this actually gives more levers to the agribusinesses to actually hoard and potentially increase the price of the produce. Just to get a bit into the law, some of the major issues in this as well. This actually exempts some the processors and the value chain participant from maintaining any stock limit, and favoring more on the major agribusinesses in case if the stock limit does not exceed their overall ceiling for installed capacity of processing. And some of the major processors in India do have huge uh, processing capacity. So again, I mean, they are exempted from this, or if the demand for export in case of an exporter as well. Also, one key thing is that this not applied to the PDS system for the time being as well. I mean, leaves open for interpretation for this to be applied in future. Very quickly on the other major demand from the farmer groups, which has been on minimum support price. So whilst in most of the countries there is a income support policy for farmers, it has started in India in the recent past as well, in terms of small amounts being provided to farmers. There has been more of a price support policy in India for declared for 23 crops, but in practice ensured primarily for paddy, wheat, rice and wheat, which have its origins in Green Revolution, again to make India self-sufficient in terms of its paddy and wheat production, and also actually it being utilized for public procurement, for public distribution system in terms of being able to provide to the low-income families, to government schools, to government healthcare institutions, and so on. This is often challenged in WTO by EU, Canada, US, Japan, a lot of developed countries in terms of the price support being provided by India. Whereas again, I mean, if we actually look to the income support being provided by these countries to their farmers, that far exceeds what India provides in form of the price support. How this is calculated is that it's actually takes into account the cost of production and then increases that by a certain number. There's a calculation going on to that, and the idea is that for whatever the farmers produce, they do get a certain price based on, again, calculated based on the cost of the cultivation in average for all the crops as well, not just for paddy and wheat, which again have led to some distortions. There has been a surplus of paddy and wheat being grown in areas not sustainable, but the idea being to actually the demand being for it to be provided for all crops, so that farmers actually have an incentive of moving on to other crops as well. So these are the major demands in the farmer movements and protests. So with this, I'll stop my sharing and I'll hand it over to Ashlesha.
Thanks so much, Rohit. Hi, everyone. So there had some technical issues. I was supposed to moderate this session and kind of start you all off with the background of the protest. And so thanks, Rohit, for going into the details. And what I'm going to do now is to give you a little bit of a background on the what, where, how about these protests, who's involved, how the negotiations with the government look like, and also a little bit about the farmers' demands. And then the other two speakers on our panel are Rohit, who you already met, and then there's Kanayan, who is a farmer, and he is connected to La Via Campesina. He's also a farm leader. And I am Ashlesha, and I am part of some farmer alliances in India, and as well as La Via Campesina since 2009. So very quickly, I'm going to share my screen with you so you can see some photographs of the protest. And yeah, let me just go into full screen mode here. Okay, so these are just some pictures to give you a bit of an idea about what it looks like. And so these protests have been going on for the last 1.5 months, which is incredible. And the reason behind the protest, as you might have already guessed, is that the Indian government very surreptitiously passed the 3 farm laws that Rohit just described the government used the cover of COVID, and they used their emergency powers, which are only allowed by our constitution during an emergency. And then they passed 3 controversial farm acts, which are basically going to deregulate agriculture, corporatize agriculture. And at the same time, they are going to take power away from the states and centralize power in the hands of the central government. So we are our government is federal in nature. The states have a lot of power of agriculture, but now they have taken that power away through these acts. And these acts were opposed by farmers unanimously, as well as by our parliament and by the state governments. So this has really been imposed upon farmers. So as Rohit already said, that they are deregulating agricultural markets, so I'm not going to go into that. But what I can tell you about the protests is that these protests are unprecedented. Never in our history have we seen anything like this. The farm laws were announced sometime in July when they were still in a bill form, and they were passed in our parliament in September. And what happened is that immediately farmers started to mobilize in their states, in particularly in the northwestern states of Rajasthan, Haryana, and Punjab. And then they announced the Let's Go to Delhi campaign, which in Hindi is called Chalo Delhi Chalo campaign. And they were supported by farmers from across the country. So now we have more than 100,000 farmers in Delhi coming in from different states. And what they've done is they've blocked 3 or 4 major highways which are going into Delhi. And what they've created is a kind of Occupy-like camp. Each of these camps is a mini city, and I'm showing you some photographs of these camps. There are community kitchens, there are libraries, there are laundry services. And some of the interesting feature of these protests is that there is wide public support, particularly coming in from the middle classes and from many other social sectors. So we have students, environmentalists, trade unions, athletes, artists, all have shown their support. In fact, the trade unions are very critical here because, for example, the All India Motor Transport Union, which represents over 9.5 million truckers and buses, they have also threatened to halt movement of all transport if the government doesn't listen to the farmers. So this kind of support is really unprecedented. The other interesting thing is that farmers have overcome the traditional differences within them. So we have a caste and class-based differentiation in the countryside and confrontation and conflict. But this is a protest where they have decided to join hands. They've decided to set aside their differences for these protests specifically. These protests are entirely non-violent in nature. The farmer movements are very clear. They don't want to disrupt or harm local residents of Delhi. And so they've kept their resolve. They've even appointed security teams who are monitoring the protests, ensuring that any violent efforts or elements, these are nipped in the bud. The only violence so far has come from the government. So the government has been quite brutal. They've been using water cannons, tear gas. They've hit farmers. They've created barricades. And they've also engaged in mediatic violence. So the government has started to label the farmers as terrorists, as separatists. Thankfully, none of this is sticking, and their attempts are failing at the moment. It is the farmers who are holding the moral high ground and the respect of the rest of the Indian society. So who is part of these protests? As I said, that we have cross-class and cross-caste mobilization. We have very strong representation of women farmers. They are working in kitchens. They are leading the protests. And more importantly, they are also supporting the farms back home. So while many protesters are coming to Delhi, women are the ones who are holding fort at home. Farmers oftentimes are swapping. Some of them come to Delhi for a few days. When they have to go back, they make sure that somebody from the village replaces them. And so that it's really incredible. The interesting thing about the wide support that farmers have managed to mobilize is also coming from the diaspora communities. And really they've set up these incredible community kitchens, and the Sikh community deserves a special mention here because of their tradition of seva and community service. It's very evident. They have mobilized their networks as well, the religious institutions, both gurdwaras and mosques. are ensuring that nobody goes hungry. Aside from many middle class supporters who have come and they have donated their time, people are cleaning, cooking, washing clothes for the farmers. Nobody is going hungry. Everybody is getting 3 meals a day. And really support is coming in from other farmers from across the country. People are sending in truckloads of flour, pineapples, almonds, and whatnot. South Indian farmers have also mobilized quite strongly. They have not reached Delhi yet. They've been going in small delegations because it's very far, but they are protesting and holding fort in their own states, and they are also ready to move to Delhi if the opportunity does come. So who is part of these protests? No, I'm sorry. Let me just go into how the negotiations with the government are going forward right now. So the farmers have had about 8 rounds of negotiations. Initially, the government tried to convince them that these acts are completely for your own good, even though farmers were never consulted, even though our parliament is opposed to these acts, even though the state governments are opposed. The government did not follow any parliamentary process. And now after imposition, they're trying to convince the farmers that they should just accept this because this is for their own good. So now, after 8 rounds, the farmer leaders are saying that the government has just been wasting their time. They're just trying to buy time. They want the farmers to suffer. Right now, it's extremely cold in Delhi. There's also unseasonal rains. So it's not easy for farmers, but they are really determined and they're resolute. They're going to continue. And we find ourselves at a complete stalemate because the farmers' only demand is that you must repeal the acts, and we can discuss the modalities later. And what is actually needed is not corporatization, but greater support, particularly for small and marginal farmers. There have also been some mischievous people who have filed petitions to evict the farmers from Delhi because they claim that the farmers are disrupting the life of people in Delhi, when in fact that's not true. Farmers are not even entering Delhi. They are completely at the border, and they're actually letting ambulances and important vehicles, everything pass. There's a Supreme Court hearing on the 11th of January. The government has now basically washed its hands off. They're saying that we don't want to do any more negotiation. We are going to let the court decide, which has never happened. The government never actually lets the court decide on these kinds of issues. But now, and the farmers have not approached the court. So it's only a one-sided demand from the government. The government has approached the court, and now the court is going to look into this matter, and we are going to find out on the 11th Jan. The farmers are actually quite concerned because the Supreme Court is also a tool of the government right now, so we don't know in what direction they're going to decide. And on the 26th of Jan, which is India's Republic Day, there's a very big celebration in India. It's the celebration of the Indian Constitution. The state carries out the parade of the military, Navy, and Air Force, and the farmers have decided that if there's no resolution until then, and which is most likely going to be the case, farmers are going to carry out a massive tractor rally. Here's a photograph of a mock practice rally that the farmers already did. It was incredible. There were thousands and thousands of tractors streaming in from the villages. And they are going to go into the Delhi from the borders to inside Delhi with their tractor march, and they are going to carry out a parade as well. And they are going to demonstrate their allegiance to the flag of India, which is also to kind of counter the narrative that they are terrorists. And it's a holiday, so they're not going to be disrupting schools or offices or anything like that. So I hope you were able to see some of the photographs on the screen. Here's a picture of a community kitchen, and here's a photo of the women who are working in the kitchens, but they're also at the forefront, and these are the reins. I think now I will hand it over to Kanayan, and Kanayan is going to tell us a little bit about the global trade agenda and why we find ourselves, and which has essentially created the conditions for why these farmers are protesting against these farm laws. So over to you, Kanyan.
My name is Kannayan Subramaniam. I'm General Secretary of the South Indian Coordination Committee of the Farmers Movements. I'm associated with Lavia Campesina. I'm very happy to address this Oxford Real Farmers Conference for the second time, this time through the computer screen. I would like to add something already spoken by Rohit and Aslesa. They have explained what are all these three acts, and what is that government wants to offer, and what is the demand of the farmers, and how this protest is happening. It's very unprecedented, kind of non-violent, very revolutionary protest in the capital by the farmers. And farmers have resolved farmers have come together in the states like northern states like Uttar Pradesh, Haryana, Punjab, Rajasthan, all these states. The main thing is these three acts are a recipe for corporatization of the agriculture in India and also westernization of the agriculture in India. The key difference from the Western agriculture and the Indian agriculture is a lot of people, close to 70% of the population is directly linked to the for their livelihood through agriculture. But in United States, hardly 1.5 to 2% of the farmers are engaged in agriculture. The government wants to bring the Western model to India to help the corporates to control over the small and marginal farms. The three acts, Prime Minister Modi ji is saying that three acts will bring in foreign direct investment in agriculture that will help the farmers in India. And also, Modi ji, the Prime Minister of India, said, we have freed the farmers from the regulatory mechanisms like Agriculture Producers Marketing Committees Acts are there in most of the states. Agriculture is a state subject according to the Indian Constitution. But Modi ji and his party, Bharatiya Janata Party, primarily they are believing in one India, one culture, one language, one market. And Modi ji is also behaving in the past like magician, like he is bringing master strokes like in Kashmir issue or demonetization issue. One overnight they have cancelled the value of money, and they have printed new currencies and made people to queue up in the banks for their own money to get out. Like that, this is a masterstroke, according to Modi ji, to bring in three acts, all the three acts together, helping the corporates. Is mainly the demand is not from the farmers. Farmers were never being consulted. And it was not the problem of the farmers that these acts are their problems. But the corporates, United States, European Union, Australia, Brazil, and many other countries were always raising their concerns in the World Trade Organization for the last 20 years that India's minimum support price regime is always appreciating in sugarcane, in wheat, rice, and other products. And they are saying that the support which is provided by the government of India to the farmers is trade distorting, and United States and European Union particularly demanding India to discontinue its one of the world's largest food security program. The food security program has two main pillars. One is procurement and stock holding, public stock holding. The procurement is based on the minimum support price to wheat and rice and many other crops. Nearly about 23 crops are getting minimum support price announcement from the central government. The wheat and rice mainly procured from the farmers, mainly small and marginal farmers all across the country, and stock were maintained by the Food Corporation of India, and public distribution system, school feeding programs, support programs to the pregnant women, aged people, people who are suffering from different diseases are getting social security support and a food security program by the government of India. So this program, United States and European Union in particular, and in general, many developed countries do not want India to continue. Farmers who are in Delhi, from Punjab, Haryana, Uttar Pradesh, and Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, these are all the farmers filling the godowns of the Food Corporation of India. So farmers want the government of India to completely repeal these three acts. But the government of India wants to convince the farmers, and they want to bring some amendments to this act that is not acceptable to the farmers. Eight rounds of discussions have failed, and farmers are sticking to their own points. But we in Via Campesina, Indian Coordination Committee of the Farmers Movements, Bharatiya Kisan Union in Uttar Pradesh, Haryana, Madhya Pradesh, Himachal Pradesh, Northern India, and Southern Indian farmers together, we have formed Indian Coordination Committee of the Farmers, have been in the forefront of our fight against WTO. WTO's design is to free the market, free the corporations to freely operate in the markets. Essential Commodities Act is prohibiting food hoarding in the godowns, and this minimum support price procurement by the government is supporting small and marginal farmers in one side, another side supporting the government to help feeding the poor people in the cities and the villages. The same farmers who are supplying to the food corporation in India also accessing food in the public distribution system for their survival. WTO's design is to dismantle this, and to the WTO says, and United States and the European Union says that the government can procure at the market price, not at the rate of minimum support price. That is what the farmers are against. And the government of India has submitted itself to the pressures mounted by European Union and the United States for the last two decades, and they have brought these three legislations in the parliament during the pandemic under the carpet. They have covered the pandemic as a carpet, and they have covered under that, and they have brought this legislation. This is completely not acceptable to the Indian farmers. Actually, if you take Australia or United States, they are growing a lot of wheat, and they are giving a lot of subsidy. United States giving a lot of subsidy to the wheat growers in the United States. If that wheat finding its way to Indian market, that will completely kill the Indian production of the local production of wheat or rice, which comes from outside. And most of the countries are supporting their farmers by giving a lot of subsidies to their farmers. But Indian farmers who are getting minimum support price is not a subsidy. It is a calculation of the cost and cost of the production. The minimum support price announced by the government of India most of the time not even meeting the cost of the production. So that is the interesting thing you have to note. Most of the states also calculating the cost of production. The central government's announcement of the cost of production of, minimum support price of the wheat or rice or other grains are less than the cost of production of many states. So in this way, this is not anymore a subsidy, but the corporates wants to dismantle the procurement, which is the essential pillar of the public distribution system and food security program. So if that is dismantled, then food can be imported from outside, and corporates can directly procure from the farmers, and they can use the government money to distribute the food. So this is the basic idea of the government of India. And Modi ji is a staunch supporter of these crony capitalists like Adani's, Ambani's, and other big companies who are very desperate into entering. Already they are there, and they are very desperate into entering into the agriculture trade and control the Indian agriculture. That will basically displace farmers from farming and will make the farmers to become agriculture laborers. And United Kingdom also having programs in India towards contract farming. Contract farming is not very new. Sugarcane farming is already under contract farming, and Rohit mentioned about the PepsiCos and other. There are other contract farming practices are already there. For example, poultry production is there under contract farming. But this contract farming is a contract farming act which facilitates and prohibits farmers to knock the doors of even the judiciary when something goes wrong. And this is creating an enabling environment to the corporates to take control over small and marginal farms, to make the owner of the land or a lease owner of the land to become a labor in his or her own farms. This is the design of this Contract Farming Act, and which is not acceptable to the farmers' movements. So, what we want, I appeal to the UK farmers and Land Workers Alliance, who are the member of Lavia Campesina, have already developed a letter to the parliamentarians, to the lawmakers of UK, and you can find that in the Land Workers Alliance website, and you can support that, and you can give moral support to the Indian farmers' struggle, and you can stand by us. Oh, I want to conclude by saying that one key aspect of Indian farming, in particular, is that it is mass production by the masses. This is what Mahatma Gandhi was also having an idea to industrialize or to become self-reliant India. So this is a fantastic model that the small and marginal farmers together, they are producing, they are supplying to the Food Corporation of India, they are feeding to the poor. There are problems that needs to be resolved by the governments. Today's government, tomorrow's government, and whatever the government comes to power. But that should be in consultation with farmers. There should be a lot of cooperation from the government side to support the small and marginal farmers, not to support the corporates. They take over the control of the ownership, decision making of the small and marginal farmers of their own farms by the corporations. The corporations will decide what we need to produce, where we need to sell, and at what price, at what quality, and so the rejection, the quality parameters set by the corporations as of now, and most of the products, I have some experience with corporates, and we try to supply to the corporates, and they are rejecting at least 50% of the producers by their quality parameters. So that is not going to help the small and marginal farmers, and we need change. That change should be in consultation with the farmers unions of India, not by this kind of autocratic, authoritarian imposition of the ruling government's acts on the small and marginal farmers. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and I would like to interact with you in any of the questions which comes up. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Kanyan. Thanks, Rohit, as well. And now we're going to take some questions from the audience. And volunteer Becca has been kind to post the questions in the chat. And I'm just going to read out some of these questions. And what we can do is do a round between us and respond to them, to some of them. So one of them is, how can you explain how women and ag laborers are involved in the protest? Could you expand or on explain why there will be a problem if buyers no longer need to be registered, or if there's an open access to markets for buyers? The third one is, what would a pro farmer and food sovereignty reform program look like? So I think we can just take these three questions. Okay, there's some more questions. I'll read them out. Is there crowdfunding that we can help the farmers with? Can we have more clarification on the role of the courts? What does it imply if the court decides? Now, clarification on the role of the court. Okay, got it. So these are some of the questions. What I can do is I can answer one or two of them and then hand it over to you and Rohit. And in the meantime, you can decide which ones you would like to respond to. I'll answer to some of the basic questions. The first one is, so the women and agricultural laborers, how are they involved? So as I said during my presentation, there are class contradictions in Indian agriculture. We have the middle and small farmers who have land, and then we have the landless farmers who are mostly agricultural workers on the farms. So because they are workers, there sometimes, as you can imagine, there are conflicts so, however, for these protests, many agricultural laborers who also lease land, and sometimes they also conduct farming themselves, they also access these markets. So when the markets become completely corporatized, and if the minimum support prices are completely removed, these laborers who also do agriculture are also going to be impacted. And also the farmers, when the farm incomes fall, they also will find it difficult to pay the laborers. So given all these issues, many laborer organizations have also joined these protests, who are both part of labor and worker organizations, and also primarily agricultural labor organizations. So many of them have supported them. Women, as I said, are already a big key part of them. And then somebody has asked for the citation of the photos. So I'm so sorry, I forgot to mention that. Those photos were actually from the New York Times, a New York Times article that came about this morning. So if anybody wants to see them, I'll be happy to share the link. And another question is, how can we crowdsource? So I think I can just mention that Indian government has restrictions on foreign funding coming into India and supporting social movements. And in fact, the government has often used this argument to delegitimize movements. They just call them as foreign funded, and there's a foreign hand. So that makes it very difficult for international organizations and individuals to support movements in India. And it has also now created problems. I think one of the main ways that people can support international audiences and people can support the farmer movements now is by mobilizing their own governments, and especially in the media, by creating much more awareness about these protests. And there's also some aid organizations. One of them is Khalsa Aid, which is a Sikh aid organization, which has been receiving some funding, but the latest I saw is that they don't need any more funding because they've received so much support, which is also an incredible thing. And now I'll hand it over to either you, Rohit, or Kanyan, whoever wants to go first.
I would like to answer one key question. That the question is that if buyers don't need to be registered, or if there is an open access to market for buyers, what is the problem? And no problem. I want to make it on record here that the role of agriculture producers marketing committees, not more than 40% of the total trade of agriculture commodities, produces are marketed under APMCs. In some states, APMCs are very important. In some states, they are still important. Not that much trade is happening in the APMCs. I have been selling my produces not always in the APMCs. I live in Tamil Nadu, and sometimes I used to sell in the APMCs. APMCs is regulating the market, regulating the traders in support of the small and marginal farmers. They are prohibiting the traders to form syndicate and exploit uh, the small and marginal farmers. That is the fundamental of the APMCs. The other side, the market is deregulated. Anybody can do anything, and if there is some dispute, and so APMCs are providing facilities to the farmers, drinking water, parking facilities, other facilities, and they are mainly discovering the price in the APMCs. These corporations so far not offering a single penny more than what is being sold in the APMCs. They are taking APMC prices as a benchmark price and doing the trade outside APMCs, the APMC price discovery. This is what so far happening. If APMCs are dismantled or weakened or disappear, then where this price discovery will happen? This is one of the problems. And for example, if I want to sell my bananas, Hope comes in Karnataka, Mysore, there is a Hope comes market. The Hope comes is declaring the price every day around 11 o'clock. So that is the price all the traders, if you take Reliance Fresh, if they are buying bananas from the farmers, they are buying at the home comes price at the farm gate. So this is the thing which everyone need to understand. Why farmers are very fearful that if the APMCs are dismantled and price discovery will go and the procurement will go, all the traders who are not needed to be registered, they can freely exploit anybody. So people are under fear of exploitation. So this is the response to one question. And as far as the other questions, this crowdfunding question, Aslesa has already explained, and photos can be shared. We will be very happy to share photos of this. Anybody can contact Aslesa. She has already shared some of the photos in this presentation. Any other questions, Aslesa?
Yeah,
What?
Rohit, I'd like to invite Rohit now to respond to some questions.
Sure. Thanks, Ashleisha. So I'll take on some of these. I see we have a few minutes left here. I'm guessing whatever we can't cover, then we'll take it on to the Zoom chat afterwards. So yeah, but yeah, I'll start with a few ones. So on the problem with buyers no longer need to be registered, in addition to what Kanaya Anna already mentioned, we have already been seeing quite a few cases from different parts of the country where there have been traders who have not registered, taken the produce from the farmers, paying a very minimal amount, promising to pay it much later, and literally fleeing from the farmers. So there has been a lot of reports, scattered reports coming of cheating of farmers being seen compared to the requirement needed of the buyers actually to be registered, so that in case if anything goes wrong, there is something to actually catch hold of them. Also, in terms of the I've shared a link as well. I've requested one of the volunteers to share that link with you on the chat. In terms of open access to market for buyers, as Kanaya Anna mentioned, there is roughly around 40% of what is actually being sold in APMCs around the country, even much before the laws came in as well. However, what we had was a lot of the private buying which used to take place. It was allowed in more than 20 states in India. That was still regulated under the state government laws. The state government had control over them in terms of what if things go wrong, and so on and so forth. Whereas over here, what is being done is it's pretty much completely deregulated in terms of no oversight in terms of actually how much is being sold, how much is being brought in, and so on. So whereas the need was that the regulation actually continues, the deregulation actually takes it into an entirely different direction in terms of what is being happened. Another question was, what would a pro-farmer and food sovereignty reform program look like? I mean, that's a pretty I guess wide encompassing thing. I guess I'll probably stick on. I mean, I'll not speak about the production aspect. I'll stick on maybe on the market reforms aspect over here, given that is really what the three laws tend to touch. There are a whole lot of other issues out there as well. Which would be needed really for pro farmer and food sovereignty reform program, the land reforms, the production changes and so on. But I'll not get into that. On the APMCs, so again, for instance, one of the things that is being spoken about prominently is ensuring for a assured price for farmers. Farmers actually get an assured price regardless of wherever they. So one of the arguments that are being actually made by the government is that this will actually lead to an increase in farmer income. If that were the case, why not actually provide an assurance to the farmer that this is the floor price, this is what the farmer would be getting in, regardless of whoever actually buys it. It doesn't have to be government procurement in itself. So that is again the primary ask, the primary challenge that is out there, which is again being reflected in the demands as well. So it is not just about what is wrong with these three laws, but a constructive ask has also been put in as well, and being prominently being spoken about. There are again various aspects in regard to the contract farming, in regard to APMCs, with regard to essential commodities, but there basically needs to be stronger regulation on that rather than deregulating it to ensure. I mean, we can get into the specifics in later if needed be. I know we are already at 2, so I don't know if I should already get into the other points, or if we want to get into Zoom now.
Yeah, no, Rohit, I think we'll just pause now, and we can shift over to the Zoom room. And I think Becca has already shared the Zoom link with the viewers. So thanks, everybody. And whoever can join us, please join us in Zoom. And whoever's leaving us now, we hope that we were able to provide some insight into these protests. And thanks again for joining our panel today. And goodbye.